a warm round of applause for Revitalization.
Wow. It's so awesome to be here with everybody. It feels like a really spiritual and powerful thing, and I'd like to recognize that. Ti'inam, sinanu na uhu, Yanaguana, sonse kakunaham, sin tamos ashte. Good day, I and moon. I really would like to highlight these languages and show them to you.
Please try again in a moment.
Part of what this whole event is, right, is, you know, and I wrote this part, connecting native Pilam to Yanaguana. And so this part of the native Pilam means people is to remember the revitalization efforts, the reclamation efforts that we should be engaged in for people that have been tribalized here on our lands. So let's start this slideshow. This is my little intro. So in Native American Sign Language, this is good. Obviously day, I, and moon. And this is a picture taken by Richard, or in one of Richard Guy's presentations. It shows a Ahinga bird, and this is Woodlawn Park. I found this really significant for multiple reasons. I grew up around Woodlawn Park. I remember just all sorts of crazy stories from hanging out with my uncle at Woodland Park, running around, just being wild. And the Ahinga bird is really significant and important to us because it has to do with our cosmologies. And so for us, it's a very sacred bird. You know, as the bird dives into the waters, it also comes back up out of those waters a lot of times with food. And so it kind of represents this barrier between the realms of the physical and the spiritual. So this is me and a bio. These are my kin. You know, this is our ceremony, our tribal ceremony, part of our sacred ways. And what we do is we stay up in a teepee, we eat bashe, and we sing songs and we pray together. And if you just look there, you'll see lots of, you know, different people from different areas and the indigenous movement here. Yeah, so I really wanted to, when I get into this conversation, to share and demonstrate that, you know, I am from Sac, I am from Yanaguana. This is part of who I am, and I have a connection to you here. And in a way, too, I feel as though I've been guided particularly. I think that for me, as I've been an academic and I've been educating myself in settler colonialism and decolonization, re-indigenization, that I've really come to understand that there's a type of Western bias that that hides the vision and the truth of how important our spiritual ways are and how powerful they are. It constantly tries to displace our realities. And so, yeah. These are my ancestors. Wanted to know. But this is actually my grandfather's mother. Their name was Maria Sofia Zeferina Reyes, and they and their family for generations were at San Fernando. And this is one of our ties to my indigeneity here in Yanaguana. Sadly, there was a priest in the 1850s whose name was Nunes, I believe he was a French bishop, and he destroyed a lot of the records. So a lot of the records that would have been at San Fernando are like burned and left in the trash because he decided, well, we should just start over. I think that kind of demonstrates a continued legacy of destruction that has been pushed upon us that prevents us from accessibility. And I really like to concern myself with accessibility. That is what a lot of my project is about. Okay, so this is what got me into this. You know, as a young Two-Spirit, I was always and always have been fascinated with language. It's poetic for me, you know, and I like to really delineate academia, like the linguistic aspect, to remember native ways and native practices, right? So in doing that, there's often a precedent, whether you look at decolonizing methodologies or the book Remembering Sweetgrass. There's a way that we acted in believing that like flowers were living beings, rocks were living beings, the stars were connected to us, these were our ancestors. And so I like to push this to the practice of linguistics, and which is to say that my people were indigenous geniuses. They created multiple languages that could be used by various tribes, and they are often understated. You know, it's not recognized how powerful and amazing it was to construct this, and less so the ramifications or why they constructed two lingua francas. A lingua franca is a language that can be used by a multitude of people to communicate with each other. And so in that, so politically, there's been pushes to make corporations and give them personhood, right? So we can conceive that a corporation can be a person. And when you look at the history of that, the reason why Supreme Court justices decided that is because they thought that the impact of corporations was so massive and connected to people that they must be designated as people. So if that's the case for settler colonial governments, I like to conceive of like, well, we understood of things as people, and so we understood of water as people, we understood of language as people, and so then when you have this conceptualization of a people, personhood to water, there's no amount of pollution that is allowable because you're hurting somebody, you know, you're hurting kin. And so a lot of my, you know, theory, my practice positions myself in that way to, you know, as far as linguistic revitalization, to remember that Pajalate, Native American Sign Language, are kin, our people, are living spirits. And so I like to really emphasize that spiritual point. But before we get into that, I wanted to just give a little demonstration of who Coahuiltecans were, where our lands are. You know, and another thing that's really powerful, which I think could be a huge statement for federal recognition of Coahuiltecans, is that the lands in these places, you know, for instance, Yanaguana, Otobotana, and there's all the way up into Austin, those, Barton Springs, those names are Pajalate names. So if the name is in Pajalate, and it was, you know, marked by Spanish priests and phrase, and that obviously demonstrates that for long amounts of time, Coahuiltecans using Pajalate have named these sacred areas. Another important fact that will play into things is in this kind of area, those are the only places where Bashe or peyote grows. And so if you kind of put two and together, the fact that Coahuiltecans and Bashe only come from this land, then it's really easy to understand that the origins of peyote ceremonies, the origins of the Native American Church, start with Coahuiltecans and So academically, I think there's a book called The Peyote Code, and it demonstrates that Carizo and Coahuiltecos are the originators of the peyote Bashe practices. This is so significant because the ways in which natives have engaged in revitalization counter to linguistic academics has been to use the Pajalate language in spiritual practices. And I think that that is a very valid and powerful form of revitalization that then demonstrates how we as native people, Coahuiltecans, can revitalize our language. A counterpoint to traditional methods. So these are, you know, pictures, this is taken from La Gente de Mesquite of Coahuiltecans. Yeah, I really like to just reflect on how different our society is, you know. For a group of standard people coming in and seeing this, they would see, like a type of destitution, a desolateness, and that's really not the case at all. You know, when I see my ancestors, I see these people, what I see is a people that were perfectly endowed to live here in our lands. They wore clothes that matched, they wore clothes that were sustainable, they wore clothes that, you know, that what nature would take back into itself. They came up with all sorts of technologies. Given the resources they had, they were geniuses. And I cannot, you know, emphasize that this is how we should have lived, and we lived because it was like worked in a way with nature. You know, that harmonization is really important. This is actually one of the things we used. I forget how to pronounce it, but it was another form of hunting for us. And then this point as well. So when I talk about it's really interesting how for Coahuiltecans that cactus was a very huge icon. So at a certain part of the year, they would all gather at the cactus, like there's these huge cactus fields that would have tuna and prickly pear, and so we would gather there at a certain time of the year, and we would eat and we would sing and we would eat Pajalate or Pasha there as well, and that's where we would all get together as kin and celebrate. And so this really highlights how important and powerful, cactus were for us. And I think that sometimes we don't really embrace that we were like a cactus type of people. But it's interesting because I feel as though there's a type of culture of a cactus, and that we do embody that. Like sometimes the Coahuiltecan people can be hard in a way, and they exist in these someone had talked about how a lot of times Spanish and Catholic people would highlight priests who went out into the deserts to engage in a type of spirituality. Like that's a common practice. Or the saint went into the desert, they found God, they faced the devil, and they came back enlightened. Well, our people existed just in these places. And the spiritual connotation that is given to Catholics is never given to Coahuiltecans. And when you think about that, it becomes even more powerful because peyote has been used by all of the tribes across Turtle Island as a form of like spiritual healing and spiritual empowerment. So I really think we need to address how we think of Coahuiltecans and conceptualize them. Okay, so a little more background. Who is Yanaguana? This is taken from Father David Massonet. He's actually the person who named San Antonio. And this is the reason why they named San Antonio. It's because he landed here on the day of St. Anthony. But what I really like to reflect on is that it gives you this comparative analysis. When you look at all the different things that were here, all of the life, and then you go outside and you don't see these things anymore, you don't see these forms of life, this demonstrates a type of destituteness, a type of degradation, a type of destruction. And I also wanted to demonstrate that this is one of the places where Yanaguana, its definition is given. This comes from Swanson. J.S. Swanson will get into in a bit. And so I wanted to phrase this, right? What is Yanaguana? And really, we would never, like, what is Ānua? I wouldn't say that about myself. What is DeFranco? Or what is, just not, that doesn't make sense. But it's rather like, who is Yanaguana? And I think that when we drink the waters of this place, all of those waters that are within us now, that there's a spirit of Yanaguana that wants us to remember who it is, and that it's alive and that's living, it's still powerful and it's here. That there's places where it's no longer flowing as powerful as it used to be. Okay, so this really positions my approach towards linguistic revitalization, and as well why I'm engaging in the project of creating a child's book in the first place. So this is someone whose name is Wesley Leonard, and what they really demonstrate in these sayings that there's a vast disconnect between the tribal communities who are engaging in revitalization or trying to implement it within their communities, and linguistic departments that, in a sense, often engage in a type of exploitation and categorization that would be different from the way we would do things. Which is to say that many of the authors that have written about our language, who are Trokey, Lyle Campbell, Rainier, Swanton, and there's probably some few others that I'm forgetting, that their concerns with the linguistics of Pajalate is the grammatical aspects, and to make it quantifiable and digestible or palatable to other academics. These projects don't often engage in actual revitalization for the tribes. And one of the stories that I'd like to highlight is a story by Albert S. Gatchett. So Albert S. Gatchett is another one of the linguists who studied our language. Albert S. Gatchett, in the 1820s, was searching for by the Smithsonian the last speakers of Home Kurdo, Katoname, and Coahuiltecan. These languages are all kind of related in a way, and we're trying to uncover that stuff. But in Reynosa, Mexico, he finds what he says for the last 25 speakers. And so what he does is he lives with them for a little while, he documents everything, and then he leaves. And, off of this work, he becomes, it really strengthens him even more in his career. But those last 25 speakers, like, what happened to them? Nobody really knows, I think. I haven't been able to find out what happened to them. And I think that this really demonstrates a distinct difference in the approach of Native people and linguistic people and the effects of settler colonialism, right? Native people, in my opinion, my people, if they came to the last speakers of our language, they would be like, we have to teach as many youth as we can. We have to have the youth come hang out with these people. We have to remember to keep their legacy going, And so I think that there is a type of way in which linguistic departments and academia in general engage in theory, right? And they oftentimes neglect or don't have a connection to practice. And that's because of, in my opinion, something aligned to standpoint theory, right? So standpoint theory, the feminism is you've experienced these things so you understand them more deeply. It's your lived-in experience that makes your theory and practice so profound. So for me, what I want to do is confront how do we actually teach our youth how to say their things? How do we actually get the language to people? That is another place in which we are seeing a difference in the way there may be a tribal pursuit of the language and my personal pursuit. So for me, what I'm really concerned in is making sure that we can tangibly impact our community to use Pajalate. The reason for this is that our language was a lingua franca. So since it was a lingua franca, that means that Coahuiltecan people created Pajalate to be used not just by Coahuiltecans, but by every person, tribal person or not, that was on our lands. And that demonstrates a philosophical and ideological point, which is to say they wanted all of you here to use that language on this land and to speak it. And so if that is the case demonstrated by my ancestors, that's what I'm going to fall in line with and do. That sets the precedent of what I think is sacred and how to enact sacredness on my language, which the sacred methodology for Coahuiltecans would be the implementation of our language in all of our lands. Okay, this is a technique that I've really recently started to mess around with, and I think everyone else should do. It is ChatGPT. There are some issues, obviously, with how people feel about the morals of ChatGPT, but I feel as though it can actually teach you certain things. So if I am confused about the order of language and grammar, I can talk to ChatGPT and be like, how linguistically, what does this specifically mean? How would you phrase these things? And that's kind of what I've done. So there's been a couple of debates on the order of Coahuiltecan. One of the most recent ones in a document called La Gramática de la Lengua Pajalate states that this is one of the orders of Pajalate grammar. So you can see that in English we would say the cat eats the fish. But for Pajalate or Coahuiltecan, we would say the fish the cat eats. I think that there's a lot to pull philosophically and ideologically from the structure of our languages. But that is another full project that we have to engage in. And so then in his article he states this, and this is a more complex demonstration of Coahuiltecan order, right? So in English it would be the cat that is black eats quickly the fish. But for Coahuiltecans, in Pajalate, we would see the fish, the cat that is black, eats quickly. I think that's very powerful, and I look forward to breaking these things down more. The issue with this is that it's inaccessible to a lot of people. A lot of people don't, know how to get to the grammar. They can't conceive of the grammar. And so it presents one of the main issues that Coahuiltecans are facing as it regards language revitalization. I also wanted to highlight some of the things I was talking about regarding praxis and so Hannah Ender says really that this part, right? It's viewed praxis as public action that can create what? Power and freedom. And then, so education shouldn't be a banking process where information is deposited into students. Instead, it should be a cycle, reflection, and action. By this, students understand the world critically, theory, and then act within its practice to bring about change. And so it's really this type of methodology that I like to focus on, right? Because theory without good practice is just bad theory. So we have to have a marriage of practice and theory. And this is really what I see linguistic departments failing is they have great theory, but the practical application of these things, because they lack the standpoint, is failing. And so I think there's certain academic linguistic departments that are trying to address that. MIT with their indigenous language revitalization program, but it's really a component of revitalization or reclamation that is lacking. Okay, so this is, I like to phrase this as a colonial Pajalate origins, right? So this is the manual from which we pull all of our language from. This was a manual made by Bartholomew Garcia, and so for me, this also demonstrates an issue because our language is connected and completely to Catholicism. And so I say that these are the colonial Pajalate origins because the origins of Pajalate precede this, right? So this is what the Spanish people came in and they got the parts of the language they wanted and implemented it. So the reason why this is bad is because, for instance, there's ways in which they say kind of violent things like, do you consume or have you eaten the blood of other people? Do you participate in homosexual acts? Like there's a narrative that's being presented within the book that's wrong. But the place in which it gets even more wrong is that it defines a term called tamox, right? So it says tamox is the devil. But for us, we don't think that because we think that Catholics would have been like, oh, the spirit and the power and the magic is the devil. So now for us, we understand that tamox is a type of spiritual force, because it's not magic. Magic kind of falters. It's not, if you want to talk about philosophy, like maybe the affected nature of Yanaguana demonstrates the tamox of our people, right? And this is the other place where we get some of our documents and grammar from Pajalate. This is really an amazing story, and I also think demonstrates tamox for our people. I don't think that this is anything by accident that occurred, but this is called the Cuadro de Neo. The Cuadro de Neo is this book about our grammar. It has some more words, some slight additions and changes, but this was literally found in a bookstore, stuffed as binding behind a book. Wow. And so, someone bought the book, they took apart the book, I think, to rebind it, and they found a bunch of this information from him. And so it's really kind of fascinating that, it makes me think about our possibilities as well, like that there's probably in private collections more things about our languages, and it's kind of sad, to be honest. So, the document that I use often, that a lot of us use, is this book by Swanson. Swanson gathers all of that information and he puts it and compiles it as a dictionary, which is made available for us to use. Some of the issues that current contemporary linguists are working on as regards to this are the pronunciations, because you have to think of Pajalate transitioned from Pajalate to Spanish and then to English, and now we're trying to get us English speakers back to Pajalate. So pronunciation is something that is a process for us. And so what, Miguel Costa is currently engaged in their political and in their linguistic endeavors is to retrace the actual pronunciation for us. So, I would say, to say love, I would say kawa, which I would write as K, A with a macron, W-A. Miguel Costa would write C-A-G-U-A, and it would be a kind of Spanishized understanding of how to say kawa. Either way, kawa. For me, And one of the things that I'm going to highlight in my children's book is this aspect. This is very powerful because, well, one, these are our numbers, right? And Native American Sign Language. But when you put it to this, and this comes from, I believe, Juan Manuel Valdez. So these are our numbers, right? So pil is 1. And it's interesting too, I need another linguist or me needs to compare how pil relates to pilam. Pilam is people, pil is 1. So then, okay, we go to 2. 2 is ashte. So this X, sometimes it's like with Mexico, Mexico. So this happens with ashte. So instead of that X, it's like a J. And so ashte is 2. So ashte, pil is 3. So if ashte is 2, pil is 1, 3 is literally 2 plus 1, right? So that demonstrates addition, subtraction, right? But the thing that I'm really fascinated and I love is when we look at 6. This is the wrong word for 6. That's taken from Nahuatl. So that's the Nahuatl word from 6. Rather, 6 would be, I think he has it on somewhere. Okay, look here. So 6 is actually for us, achete pil, and then we put a ko achete. So what we're saying is 3 times 2. Yeah. So it demonstrates, mathematics for us. Yeah. So, and I think that particular part is very powerful because why would these people create and need math? And so I think that it demonstrates the long story that's being obscured, which is that this place wasn't just a place of simple hunters and gatherers, that this rio and the river demonstrates a long-standing culture that impacted all of the tribal peoples here for a long time, that they engaged in a type of merchant necessitating a type of mathematics. They engaged and had lingua francas because they needed to talk to a bunch of different people. And I think that the true hidden story about Coahuiltecans is that there's probably a massive civilization in our lands that impacted all of this area. Okay, Native American Sign Language. My connection to Native American Sign Languages, as has been demonstrated before, is that I am partially deaf. I'm deaf in my left ear. And I think about, how easy it is to lose another ear to be existing completely in a realm of deafness. But I also think about how my ancestors have guided me to this place, right? Which is to say that I was born in Yanaguana, I come from Yanaguana, my people come from Yanaguana. And as I was researching Pajalate, I came across this type of discovery. So one of my elders, Wayo, he would talk about a Native American Sign Language, and I would just pester him. I'd be like, so what does it do? Why do you know this? And he would be like, oh, it's our sign language. And I was like, so we have a Coahuiltecan sign language? And that's kind of all I would get. And then, my other elder, when my other elder was Richard, would be like, yeah, we have this information. We gave it to, I think their name was Bruce de la Cruz, and they were working on it. So then, because of the way that things are, I just kind of started researching and doing things on my own. And what I ended up finding is that there is Native American Sign Language and there's Plain Sign Language. Plain Sign Language originates from Native American Sign Language, and that there's a long-standing documentation of Native American Sign Language usage within Texas specifically. And what I wanted to demonstrate is a disparity and something that I think is an issue as it regards reclamation of this. And that is that this person who wrote the book on Indian Sign Language is being adopted by, a Sioux tribe. So I think what tribes and people and academics have to be aware of is that because of power, there's a type of engagement that's happening here where Tompkins has a power to give to the Sioux, and the Sioux necessitate, they need that power, so they then bring it in, right? And that happens everywhere. A lot of academics get absorbed into these tribes because of the power they bring. And so what we should do is really disturb that and remember to empower our children and the Sioux people, all of our youth to speak our languages so we could have our own linguists, our own people learning and teaching our language, And I think that we have to be really, really concerned with this because there's so much massive amounts of culture that are within the language. For instance, if I say in Spanish, ¿Quieres comer, eh? That gives a type of emphasis right? It's like a bigger question or more of a question. So that comes from Pajalate. So Pajalate, to ask a question, you would put an before or an after to make it into the question. So there's all these remnants of our culture within Spanish, within this whole community here, that we need the youth who are of these people to kind of pull out and break so that we can understand more about ourselves. There's another term, naco, and it's kind of like a derogatory term. It's like someone like you think, like you're not thinking. So naco in Pajalate means to think. Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate the history of Native American Sign Language so we can kind of put that to rest, that there's a deep connection. Well, this is LaSalle. He was an explorer in Texas. But I really liked this demonstration by Father Espinosa. This comes from Marta Schutz. Marta Schutz is one of the premier academics regarding our culture. Marta Schutz, really, yeah. So he says, they are of different tongues, but they understand each other by means of sign, being so skillful in the use of their hands for speaking that the most eloquent orator would envy their gestures. By means of this, their hand language, they trade with each other and have some in their intercourse. And then this other part really is important because it demonstrates right here. You can talk to a bunch of Indians by signs, and those with us manage to make themselves a little understood in their language. Part of the issue that people who study Native American Sign Language are having with these two demonstrations is that they didn't like either one because they didn't clearly demonstrate, that Natives were talking with an advanced sign language. I think that this really disputes that. And so when academics who discuss Native American Sign Language, they have this conversation. It's really centered on was this legitimate sign language, and so then they differentiate. They kind of push the argument, the conversation forward. And so there's been a back and forth of was this intentional? And then it's yes, this is intentional. And these are the examples of why it is intentional and why it is an advanced language. And this is also another way how I demonstrate that it didn't come from south of northern Mexico. So Hernán Cortés, the Spanish suggested themselves as an introducer of it on this continent. They're adept in the use of signs. Cortés, as he marched through Mexico, would use signs. When he came in contact, finding them necessary, and then their belief is that the Indians learned these signs. Besides the egocentry demonstrated by the Spanish through their belief system, this quote demonstrates a key factor regarding Native American Sign Languages, which is to say, the Spanish believe they created Native American Sign Languages in the destruction of Mexico City or surrounding areas, and they must not have encountered it in those places, right? So if they're in central Mexico and they're saying, we created this in a way, and the Mexica at the same time are we don't know what you're talking about, but they're encountering it in the future. As far as I've come to the conclusion, there is no demonstrations of Native American Sign Language in the Mexica. So in my opinion, it comes from further up north, from Chichimeca, Coahuiltecans. I haven't encountered examples of Chichimeca, but it's possible they could have used it as well. So that's one part of it. And then this part, so this is Cabeza de Vaca. If you don't know about Cabeza de Vaca, they're really influential and have a big impact on Coahuiltecan culture. The reason this is because they're a Spanish explorer that got lost in our lands, and they're really important because they demonstrate pre-colonial existence, pre-colonial contact existence, which is to say that our people didn't know Spaniards up until that time, and he came into this place lost. And all of those interactions he had is with the people that didn't know Spaniards yet. And so this is part of the argument. They're referring to other people about this person Turk and how, but Cabeza de Vaca's accounts, along with Coronado and the other ones, make for a whole picture that this was a very complicated language that was being used consistently throughout time in Texas, Yanaguana. So now that we got into the colonizers out of the way, I think it's important to highlight what tribes say. So the Kiowa, and this is where they're from, and they continually are known for really sharing the language and making Plains Indian language. It's literally very similar, the same thing. And so what ends up happening is like that a lot of these natives start to say, well, we learned it from tribes south of us. And when you look at the migratory patterns of the Kiowa, they're coming all into our land, right? And so if they're dispersing and teaching all these Plains Indians and they're learning it from here, it brings them to this area. And another point that's going to demonstrate this is, as well, the Comanche. So the Comanche aren't native to Texas. They do take up a lot of things in this place. And so when we look at their own accounts, they also say that they did not learn it from the Kiowa. They say they taught it to the Kiowa and the Arapaho. And so the reason why I pulled up Quanah Parker is, this is Quanah Parker, if you don't know what Quanah Parker is. Quanah Parker is the propagator, perpetuator of peyote ceremony. He's, in a sense, the originator. The reason why he then created the Native American Church and was such an advocate among other Plains Indians is that he was actually in our lands. So he was in our lands, and the story is, that there's two stories, but I'll tell you one of them. The story is that he was hunting, and so he got gored by a bull. When he gets gored by a bull near the border, a native woman takes him in and she starts healing him with peyote. And so he's so transformed by the use of peyote as a medicine that then he continually does not stop talking about it. He takes it to all the other native tribes. And so this demonstrates a legacy by the Comanche to come into Texas lands and take or use our practices and spread them to other natives. And so this happened with peyote. This, in my opinion, as well happens with Native American Sign Language, because the Comanche are really one of the people that spread it as well. Okay, so just to close on that last part, as far as I can conclude, and there's other articles that have been published on this, the origins of Native American Sign Language are on these lands, and other tribes state that they learned it from these lands, and colonizers demonstrate that they learned it among Coahuiltecans, and that it was in continual use by Coahuiltecans, and that it was a sophisticated language, that it wasn't just like, come, you know. Okay, and so as I've been doing, I want to counterposition what the revitalization and usage of Pajalate actually looks like for tribal people, contrast to the way it has been explored and used among settlers. So this is Pache, or peyote. Peyote is our sacred sacrament. It is completely holy to us, and it is a deep, essential part of our culture. And so this is where we transition for me from the academic aspects, the linguistic aspects, into the spiritual realm and application and practical application of things. So as I was exploring these things, I started to reflect on, well, like, how did we engage in revitalization? Like, is there anything left? Because for me, I'm, as a Coahuiltecan who's looking to revitalize our language, there's probably less than 10 speakers, and I have to uncover all this story. And even those speakers are still in the process of learning themselves, there are no native speakers. And so when I think about, are there any ways in which our language existed and continued to be perpetuated, this is one of those profound demonstrations. Our most sacred, sacred cultural sacrament demonstrates the usage of our language, not only by us, but through all the other tribes along Turtle Island. And the reason that this demonstrates this is, let me see if I have it on the slide. Yes, so peyote songs. So this is put together by Indigenous Cultures Institute. They have a lot of resources. They've been helpful and so helpful. They're also engaged in their own projects. But what you will continually see in songs, I'll probably do one for you here. In peyote songs, they're peyote songs. So if I go, Yanaguana yana howe ne ne howe yo yana, 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 Yanaguana yana yano he ne yo wa. So Yanaguana is over and over and over again in Pali songs. Like, why were they singing this? And it's because those origins come from us and our people. They come from Pajalate, Yanaguana, water is life. Some of these other things, like, we're still trying to figure this out. But this is a phrase that's in every Pali song. It's said at the end, it's Iano he ne yo wa. So some people believe, I think Gary, that is, I'm not sure, believe that Iano he ne yo wa means with all that there is. There's other people that believe it sounds like Zanai, which is father in our language. So. Okay, now we get to the actual project. This is my project and what I want to do. I want to create a children's book, and in this children's book, what I would like to do, or even little illustrations, is get words. You know, this is bird, but in our language, it's yam. And so what I want to do is take these words and attach illustrations to them to make it for children, so that our children can like begin to speak the little words that we have and we know. So yam. And then, I love this one. That would probably be like ja, but it means to dance. With this actually is a picture of this one of my elders and his family. So this is Wayo, this is Jesse, and they're doing their deer dance. This is his son, Julian Reyes, not me. And then this is a little baby. Yeah. And so in my book, what I want to do is I take our philosophies and put them in, you know, so that the children see who we really are. I think that part of talent, part of being gifted, part of knowledge of power is to take these massive things that, you know, I've learned or other people have learned and make them to where they are able to be consumed and digested by, you know, the little ones, by the youth, so that everyone can have access to it, you know? And that's really what I want to do here. So speaking of our ideologies, you know, my perception is that Pajalate was used as a language to bring us all together. And so, Jagu, united. And so for me, this is Juan Mencias of Curriculum Urdo. This is Ramon Vasquez, the ED of AIT. This is Dr. Rocha and Dr. Garza and Maria Rocha, and this is our little Ahinga bird. And I think that one of the core principles demonstrated by us is a type of solidarity that we're no longer engaged in. And that this solidarity has been removed, has been destroyed because we are powerful spiritual people who could do more together. And that part of the mark of settler colonialism is to destroy us, to make us forget who we are, and to remove us from those positions. Yeah. This is Tap, which is earth. To say Mother Earth, you would say Taptai. So, cute photo. And then the I think this is the last one. Yes, this is what another aspect that I want to do. So, I'm going to teach our youth how to do the numbers, and what I wanted to put here is how to do them in Native American Sign Language, so that we can make also not the connection to Pajalate, but Native American Sign Language as well. Yes, now let's sound. Now let's sound this thank you and
Wow.
Dang.
Question.